Awesome, everyone. Well, welcome. My name is Dev DeVrad. I'm a Senior Assistant Dean of Admissions here at Reed, and I use he, him pronouns. I will be moderating this event for all of us today, and joined by a faculty member in our bio program. I am going to pass it on to her in just a second. But before we do that, just some housekeeping stuff. So if you've got questions, which I highly encourage, ask your questions and make use of this time to learn more about our biology program and related programs. But what we're going to ask you to do is keep yourself out and mute, and instead put your questions in the chat box. So when you wiggle your mouse around, there's a chat box there at the bottom of your screen. You'll click that, open it, and then type your questions in there. Just a reminder to keep the questions about the programs that we're talking about, and keep them, pretty broad and generic. We are recording this session for our YouTube page as well for future readies and prospective readies to see. So we want to keep the questions broad and open. If you've got something that's like very specific or something that has nothing to do with our biology programs here, we may pass over those questions for now, but feel free to email me directly and we can chat about that instead. That being said, I will go ahead and pass it off to Janis and let you take on the show.
Great, thanks, Dev. I'm Janis Shampay. I'm a biology professor here in the Department of Biology at Reed College. I have been here since 1990, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about people in our department, the major, and when I talk about the biology major, I'm actually going to include a lot about what I consider are very closely related majors, and there's a lot of overlap. So that would be the biochemistry, molecular biology major, BMB, neuroscience, and environmental studies biology. So when I talk about the program, we'll start off with the core things that are the same about all of those majors. So the biology department has 12 faculty, and our expertise ranges from computational biology to ecology and evolution. I myself am a molecular biologist. I study telomeres, which are chromosome ends. And I have been doing this since graduate school, in fact. And predominantly, I've been interested in studying the proteins at the end of the chromosome in frogs, and in particular, how they regulate the activities that lengthen the end of the chromosome to counteract incomplete copying. But but as I said, there are 12 of us, and we cover quite a broad range of biological topics. Each of us teaches our core course that we teach is going to be a 300 level, sort of mostly taken by sophomores, juniors, some seniors. These are courses that have a lecture component as well as a lab component. So you'll actually get to do laboratory work in all of your biology full unit courses. And so, for example, I teach a lecture lab course in eukaryotic gene regulation. So basically mechanisms of maintenance of genetic information, how it's expressed. And the ecologist teaches an ecology course, our cell biologist teaches a cell biology course, and so forth. We also all each teach either in the introductory series, the topics in biology, 4 to 6 weeks in there, or we teach a 100 or 200 level conference course only with no lab. So I taught one last year on human genetics. This coming year, we've got one, an introduction to neurobiology. We have lichens of the Pacific Northwest, that's going to be new. Evolution, courses like that at the sort of 200 level. And then we also all teach, each of us teaches an advanced seminar course taken predominantly by juniors and seniors. And these are these are focused on reaching the current research, on reading the current research literature in our areas of expertise. So we've got developmental neurobiology. I teach one on telomeres. We've got human-plant interactions. So more specialty courses that are fairly advanced and are taken by people who have some background information. So that's the overview of the courses offered by each of us. The program, the major requirements, and here again, I'll start off with kind of the kind of thing, the sort of progression through the major that you might see, whether you're a straight biology major or if you decide to do biochem molecular biology or neuroscience or ES biology. So obviously you're going to start off taking the introductory biology sequence, topics in biology, Bio 101, 102, typically your first year. You'll usually take chemistry your first year, general chemistry. Neuroscience students might take psych in the fall of their first year. But beyond those very introductory courses, you're going to take organic chemistry your second year, or possibly physics, or both if you're a biochem molecular biology major. Some math, 2 math courses typically. And then at least 3 of these sort of upper division biology courses that have a lecture and a lab component. So biology majors will take 4 of those, and they can sometimes take 5, or they'll take some of these advanced courses instead. And you get to take, like, as I said, you get to take courses across the breadth of biology that we offer. Each of these 300 level courses, by the way, is structured so that usually, well, it's a little bit variable, but oftentimes, like my course, the first half of the laboratory, I'm teaching you through some laboratories that are set up. We're learning how to do some basic molecular biology. And then the second half of the semester is independent projects. And the independent projects for our 300 level courses are what it sounds like. You get to have a lot more leeway in devising an experiment. And we think these are very important components of our curriculum, because the fact that you're going to be taking 3 or 4 or 5 of these before you're a senior really gives you a lot of experience in asking and trying to answer questions in a range of biological topics, so that when you start your senior year, which has, of course, the capstone senior thesis project, you'll have a lot of experience under your belt on exploring questions in these different areas. So so you'll take at least 3 of those. If you're a BMB major, you'll take some additional chemistry. If you're a neuroscience major, you would take some additional psychology courses. And it might sort of specify which courses in biology are particularly relevant. Let's see, lost my train of thought. One of the sort of, another feature of our program that's I think very valuable is something that's not a course that we offer, but it's the fact that we have a longstanding Friday afternoon seminar series where we bring in researchers from around the country to talk about what kinds of questions they're intrigued by and how they went about trying to answer them. And so the students get an opportunity to hear these stories from all kinds of areas that we aren't able to cover ourselves. And that's every Friday afternoon. And usually the students have an opportunity to go to meet these folks at a luncheon too. So those seminars are open to actually anybody on campus. It's mostly attended by science majors. So let's see, courses, orders, what the 300 level courses are like, the 400 courses. Yeah, so I think that's the overview of the structure of the major. I should remind you too that the most of those majors start out about the same. I'd probably advise when I'm assigned a new academic advisee, a first year student, and they say, well, I can't decide between bio and BMB. And it's like, well, you're going to take the same thing anyhow. So you have to decide right away. You're going to start off with biology and chemistry, and you'll take the humanities core sequence, which is required. Some minor variations on that. And in fact, I also took my, although BMB and neuro are really interesting courses, interesting majors that allow for a little bit more integrated interdisciplinary work across those majors. I will tell you that as a biology major, you can certainly take the biochemistry courses. You can certainly take psychology courses. And a lot of the, in many cases, you can do similar theses as you would do if you were a BMB major. My students, I typically have an equal number of biology and BMB students in my lab as seniors, and they often do very, very similar kinds of theses. So just depends on how much you want to have the rest of your program really focused on these on two separate areas. Let's see, what have I missed, Dev, in terms of the big picture overview?
I think you
Talking
did a great job hitting the big points. I don't know that I can think of anything that specifically you missed. We did get a couple of questions that came in. If
let me look at my little list here of
For
things that I wanted
sure.
to mention, see if I've any more I want to add. Oh, well, here, I actually dug up a list of thesis topics from recent years. I
Perfect.
decided to, I just sort of like read off a few of these, because I can tell you about my thesis project. So for example, my current students, one of them is studying the regulatory region of the gene that controls the regulatory region of the gene whose gene product is telomerase, and this is an enzyme that adds more DNA onto the end of the chromosome. So she's studying the sequences of DNA that control when this gene is expressed. And she's basically taking this piece of DNA and doing recombinant DNA to cause this piece of DNA to turn on a gene called luciferase, which then glows in the dark, and she can measure how much that is. They've just rolled out some data that we were looking at earlier today. My other thesis student is trying to answer a more detailed question of something we thought we knew, but in fact, we didn't have as complete a picture as we thought we did. What he's basically trying to do is get the absolute DNA sequence of large chunks of DNA at the end of the chromosome using some very new technology called nanopore sequencing, where the DNA molecule is threaded through a pore and the electrical charge says, that was an A, that was a C, that was a G, that was a G, that was a G. And trying to basically get the sequence to tell us in actual nucleotides how long the junk DNA, the repetitive DNA is at the end of the chromosome. So it's exciting for me to do something that addressed a question we'd addressed using older techniques 30 years ago, and now we're trying to use a cutting edge technique to see how correct we were. But here's a few other ones, if you're not interested in telomeres or molecules. So here we have the effects of low dose radiation on zebrafish development. We have what happens when brain glial cells encounter vision loss. The vulnerability of tall urban Douglas fir trees to drought. Role for neurotensin in the mouth brooding fishes. These are fish that basically incubate their eggs in their mouths, so they can't eat for a while. It's pretty crazy. Impact of rapid environmental warming and nutrient availability on cyanobacteria, mutation rates in Daphnia, mass spec of neuronal extracellular matrix, and neuromodulation of the frog vocal hindbrain circuit. That was just sort of a random selection of thesis topics from the last few years.
I'm sure easy
Okay.
peasy, right? No big deal
Yeah,
on any of these. Yeah, of course. Of course.
I know it sounds very intimidating, but like I said, we have this figured out. We start with the basics. You get to learn a little bit more you get to know more deeply about a variety of topics. You get to do independent work in these 300 level courses. So by the time you start your thesis, you know a lot more. And you're usually working in concert with a faculty member and their research. And so it's not like you're starting from ground zero, right? You've got this body of work that your faculty member is working on, and their thesis students and their papers. So you have a place to start.
Yeah, and I want to emphasize something that Janice said, which is that faculty support, right? That I think oftentimes in these really academically rigorous spaces, it can often feel very cutthroat, and I think something that Reed does so well is create these environments that are very supportive and collaborative. Um, but
I have a follow up on that. Another
yeah,
thing that I've been known to tell prospies, because I went to Northwestern in Illinois, and at Northwestern you had to worm your way into a lab in order to be able to do independent research. At Reed, you get to do a thesis. You have to do a thesis, so you will get to do a thesis. You don't have to go through any machinations to stand out in a way that would allow you to do senior research.
I love that. I am going to skip around the questions because this one of these questions actually kind of pertains to what we're talking about right now, which is a thesis. So I'm going to skip over to um, what about interdisciplinary theses? And I'm actually going to piece together a question from someone else, which is, we talked about some of those interdisciplinary majors between bio, right? So like bio ES or molecular biology. Um, how common is it for students to piece together a bio with maybe something that's not traditional? In this particular student's example, they asked about bio and art.
Mhm. So there are standing interdisciplinary majors that would be biochemical biology, neuroscience, environmental studies. Those are standing majors. There's also the opportunity to propose an ad hoc interdisciplinary major. And here it's up to you to say, after consulting with faculty members in both of the relevant departments, to propose a course of study that has features of both majors. And your argument for proposing that is because you want to do a thesis that really actually uses the methodology of two very different disciplines. So there's been bio art, there's been bio econ, bio philosophy, bio anthropology is not uncommon. I would say we have one or two every year out of a total of, typically what? We have about 35 to 40 students doing theses in the biology department each year who are either bio or BMB or neuro or ES or interdisciplinary. And so there's usually one or two each year that are doing one of these ad hoc majors that they've put together them on their own.
Awesome. And outside of the thesis, what are other research opportunities that students often pursue?
So in addition to the fact that you get to do independent research in the context of the 300 level courses, and these really are independent and they often riff on things that the faculty member, their research program. So the classic one would be summer research in the various labs in the biology department. We have a lot of support for those positions. I think this coming summer, we're probably going to have 35, 40 students in the biology building, supported by either one of several field research funds, a department fund left to us by a now departed plant physiologist called Helen Stafford. So we fund about 8 positions every year from her fund. And also many individual faculty have their own research grants, and so they can fund, 1 to 3 students each off of those. So there's going to be a ton of students in the lab this summer. So most of the students who go through these programs, I would say, do at least one summer either with us or they get a summer position at a research university somewhere across the country.
And in terms of science majors, what makes a good and valuable thesis? How do you help students find what they want to study and research? What does that conversation look like?
Good question. So again, I advise my students who are, say, juniors and wondering, how do I go about picking a thesis? I said, well, it's a conversation between you and another faculty member. So what you're going to do at the beginning of your senior year is you're going to go around and have initial chats with faculty members, maybe classes, maybe people you've taken courses with. It's like, well, you know what? I kind of like Derek's stuff. I know he does stuff with Drosophila cells and cytoskeleton. And that was kind of cool when I took his cell biology class. So you go and you talk to him and say, what's going on in your lab right now? And he'll talk about the kind of projects that recent students have done or where he wants to go with his collaborators. Some of that will sound interesting, some of it less interesting. And so you'll go away, you'll maybe read a couple of the papers, you'll come back and say, could we talk more about, option 2 or direction, subject 2? And then you usually, after a couple of these conversations, you then write a very, very short proposal. At this point, the project's probably not fleshed out very well, but you have some idea about what kind of question you think you would like to address, and maybe a little bit about how you're going to go about it. And then in the first few weeks of the fall semester, you're going to read some more, you're going to talk to them some more, you're going to have lab meetings with all the people in the lab, and you'll sort of work on it more. And then you'll start getting into the lab and trying some experiments and getting a sense for how you're going to do your whole experimental design. So it's an iterative process. It's not like you just go around people's like, here's a project or here's a project. It's, like I said, people will say, well, I'm interested in this, this, or this. And so you just find somebody whose projects seem on the whole, the kind of work that they do seem on the whole is interesting, and you can see yourself working on it. And you sort of work together to sort of come up with an actual experimental design and an approach. And then, you typically are gonna, you're gonna meet regularly with them. You might have a weekly time set up to check in, to talk about what you've done and what you're gonna do in the upcoming week. Or in my case, usually, our labs are right next door. So I'm here in the office, Hart's in the lab next door, and they just come in and say, can I talk to you about this? It's like, yeah. So we talk, and they realize, yeah, they're okay. They're going to do what they thought they were going to do. Or, yeah, I think maybe I should rethink what I thought I was going to do. And so it's very interactive. Sometimes people across campus ask us, well, so how many hours do you spend with each thesis student? Like I spend an hour a week with my thesis students. Like in the first place, I don't know. Second place, it's a lot more than an hour because it's just like all the time, right? It's very collaborative.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think that it just paints a picture for our prospective students about that collaborative environment. I love this question from Natalie, which is, what is your favorite part of the biology program?
Oh, so my favorite part, so I don't know if this is exactly the question you're asking, but this is the answer I will give you. Why did I come to Reed College? So I came to Reed because I really like doing research. I find it's when I get up in the morning, it's like, I wonder how that works. Or what if I did this instead with that experiment? But there are times when it's like, you do an experiment and it doesn't work, your technique doesn't work, so you just have to do it again. So it's nice to have other sort of activities as part of your job. And the other thing I really like is helping students learn and teaching. And so of the various places that I interviewed, I felt like Reed, there are a lot of places that will ask you to do a lot of teaching. They don't really support your research. They don't really have the tradition. They don't have the research infrastructure for doing work with students. Whereas I came to Reed because people have this shared idea of the educational mission, but they understand that the educational mission includes independent research with students, and therefore we are encouraged to and supported in our endeavors to have an independent research program going that students can can participate in. So it really is that melding of those two sides. We have a little saying in the biology department, research is teaching is research is teaching. They're really not different.
I love that. How does funding work for the thesis? And I'm just going to add this to the rest of the question, which is um, funding for non-thesis research projects that students might be interested in.
Uh-huh. So because the thesis is part of the curriculum, it's a required course, we support it financially. Many of us use our own research funds to support the reagents and small equipment that students need for their thesis projects. In addition, the biology department's budget is available to fund these projects. We have a little funding mechanism. You can write a short proposal, which we encourage students to do if they're thinking about doing something kind of expensive, something on the order of $1,000, $1,500. It's like, you should propose that so that somebody can read it and say, yes, have you thought about this possible problem with your design? Because, it's actually writing out what you're going to do and justifying it is actually a good way to make sure that you know what you're doing. So, but we pretty much fund things that people want to do. The independent projects that you do in your upper division courses usually can get funding to do modest projects for those. It's usually like, I got to buy an antibody, or I got to order some primers, or I need funding to take this trip to the coast to collect organisms or something like that. So modest expenses are supported because the independent projects are a required part of our curriculum.
Thank you. In the beginning, you also talked a little bit about classes with labs versus classes with no labs. And at Reed, we also we spent a lot of time talking about this conference learning model that we have. Can you talk about what that looks like in the bio and maybe STEM in the greater picture?
Right.
How does that work in those classes?
So I would say that the sort of pure conference style, in its conference style in its purest form, is pretty clearly used in the advanced seminar courses, those really specific junior, senior level courses. You're literally sitting around a table talking about a target article for that week. The 300 level courses are usually a mix. They're more lecture-y, and it kind of depends on the instructor. But so they're very interactive lectures. It's not like I'm up there and I can't be interrupted. So it's an interactive lecture. The 200 level bio courses are also, because they're typically small, 20 students or so, they're a mix of conference and lecture. And it might be that, one day the faculty member will do mostly lecturing and intersperse those with days where the group is discussing an assigned reading. So as a general rule, I would say the STEM courses are going to still do some traditional lecturing. But as I said, at minimum, they're smallish classes, so they're interactive lectures. And many faculty, especially the younger faculty, are starting to incorporate more conference, more discussion, more flipped classroomy type active learning activities. So it's certainly not just the sage on a stage kind of thing, but there's probably more of that than, say, in a history class or something like that.
I love that line, sage on a stage. I am
I
also
didn't make it up.
stealing it. I'm stealing it for every info session I ever do from now on. I love that. Um, as a student sort of progresses through the biology program, what does the ratio look like between the science classes and humanities classes?
So this is interesting. If you go to the Reed's, if you go to the biology department webpage and you go to the, I forget which link, academic program, somewhere in there, I think, is a link to one example 4-year plan, sort of mapped out what a bio type major will take over the course of 4 years. And the thing with science majors is that because you need those foundational year-long introductory courses, you're taking a lot of those early on, and then it's almost like, because that first year you're typically taking humanities, you're taking bio both semesters, you're taking chem both semesters. So there's not a lot of room to take humanities courses or economics or what have you. There's more room in your schedule as you go up through the years. So if you look at this map that I have on the biology department site, you'll see that that's where more of the flex goes. And a lot of people like to sort of save some, English or history or anthropology or something like that, or art, for their senior year as sort of a nice counterbalance to the efforts they're putting in on their thesis. It just kind of depends. Other people kind of like to focus on one thing at once.
I um I put two links in the chat. I put the sample schedule that Janice was talking about. That's what that first link is. That second link I put in there is just a general bio page. So if you haven't had a chance to look through that, there's some great information on there as well. And let's talk about grading. So I know the grading model at Reed is very much a we don't outright show you the grade until you ask to see the grade type of thought process. How does that work with the STEM classes, and um, what kind of relationship do the bio students have with their grades?
It really varies. I would say that most of the people in biology will make extended comments on exams and papers and lab reports. Might say some summary comments like good, good overall, particularly in this kind of aspect of it. So it's very comment related. And we usually try to make sure that if somebody didn't do a very good job, that they would know that, so that they know that they could work a little harder, do a little better, come talk to the instructor a little bit more. I want to steal a line or a description from one of my colleagues in linguistics who went to Reed, and he says, I could put a grade on a paper when I hand it back. I could put a B plus, and you get it back. That's kind of the end of the conversation. That's the end of the learning journey. Whereas if I put all these comments on it, the learning continues in the process, in the dimension of that feedback, right? So slapping grades on something, it is kind of final. It's sort of like, oh, there it is, I'll move on. Whereas the comments sort of encourage more back and forth, or at least at the minimum, you're reading that and you're getting that back and forth. Students, my advisees range. Some of them come to Reed because they were looking forward to that, the emphasis on grades. They didn't want to constantly be like wondering what they're going to get on their test. They wanted to sort of push that aside and focus on learning for learning's sake and all that sort of stuff that we like to say. Sometimes they find it harder to adjust to than they were expecting, because they've spent 12 years getting that gold star, that positive feedback on those exams and those papers. And it takes them a while to adjust. And others really sort of thrive. Usually after the first year or so, most people are kind of into a groove, and they're happy to sort of go forward with knowing that we'll tell them if they're really struggling. I think it'll be pretty obvious from the kind of comments that you get, that they can always come to us and ask, I feel like I'm not getting as much out of this class as I could. Could we talk about some strategies that I could, so that I could get more, I could learn more deeply. And I think it depends on the material too, as to how that conversation might go. I think some of my colleagues in physics and chemistry will put numbers on exams, but that they don't tell you whether that represents an A or a B or a C. But we don't in biology.
Um, what makes the Reed College Bio program different than attending a bio program maybe elsewhere?
So I think I sort of alluded to this in one dimension, because it's very research focused, but it's a small college. So you sort of get the best of both worlds of being at a research university where you might have to fight to get into a lab, whereas here you get to do research repeatedly as part of your curriculum. So that's one thing. I do think that there are a number of small colleges out there that have many of our attributes, you know, strong biology departments, opportunities to do some sort of senior project. Most places it's not required. And I do think that one of the things that makes biology at Reed stand out is honestly this incredible long-standing tradition of doing it. I interviewed at places that, like I said, they wanted you to do research and they wanted you to get federal grants, but they had no tradition of it. They had no grant writing support. They had no tradition of it. They didn't have any common equipment that was any good. It was really like, I'm not gonna be able to get anything done here. Whereas here, it's just this shared endeavor and everybody's sort of in it together. The other thing that is often the case at some institutions is that you have the younger faculty who are all hungry to do research, and the older faculty don't do it anymore. It's of this classic deadwood. But I think we all are still very active research-wise throughout our careers. So I just think it's a difference of degree, perhaps not of not something more specific.
No, I thought that was a phenomenal answer, and I think it goes to show, continuing to show, especially this collaborative nature that has been a theme in this session. What has been the most interesting independent study that you've seen a student do?
Uh, so including theses, it's interesting. There's always a few people who decide they want to use the research reactor in their thesis. I had a student who wanted to look at DNA damage in frog cells using our Trigger 2 reactor. We had somebody a couple of years ago who did a biology theater interdisciplinary major, and she put on a theater production, but I didn't have a chance to attend it. So I can't really say, but it sounded really creative. I should say that one of our two laboratory instructors in introductory biology is Crystal Chaw. She graduated from here in 2004. And she did a phenomenal project on spider development. In fact, her research project helped her research advisor completely shift gears from, he'd been working in sea urchins, and he shifted over completely to spider development based on Crystal's enthusiasm and novel research. In fact, her thesis that year won the Class of 21 award, and this is an annual award that Reed gives for the most creative thesis. And actually, that's something that a lot of students do. IH money for it. So you can go ahead and let a student try something kind of crazy that might not work, but it might, And if it turns out to work, like that might be a new direction that the faculty member and future students could go into.
That's awesome. I love that. Um, and then switching a little bit, talking more about we've got some questions about pre-med. and the similarities between what classes biology students do and the classes that are required for students who are interested in medical school. How does that bio program prepare students
Yep.
that choose to major in biology and go the pre-med route? Which I
Right.
should emphasize, you don't have to major in biology to go pre-med. That is just the most probably common route to go.
It's the most common. I think there's a lot of natural overlap of interest. A lot of people who are interested in medicine and medical topics have an interest in the life sciences. So there's certainly naturally an overlap there. Um, Strictly speaking, medical schools are typically looking for uh, most of the basic introductory courses that we would have you take anyhow: biology, chemistry, organic chemistry. Physics is usually required, which is not necessarily required for bio, but a number of bio students will take it anyhow. And years ago, it used to be required. Um, they'll ask for at least one math course. Medical schools will. They might ask for or recommend a genetics course. You're going to take a genetics course if you're a bio major. They may ask for a biochem course, and many of our biology majors take the biochem course over in the chemistry department to fill what's called the 5th unit for the biology major. So the biology major, you're required to take 4 of these 300-level lecture lab courses, and then you have to take a 5th unit. And that 5th unit can be a couple of these seminar courses that are advanced. It could be another 300-level course. It can be the biochem course in chemistry. So, and then oftentimes you're going to want to take some social science, either sociology or psychology, and those are topics that bio majors often will take to fill distribution requirements, general education requirements. So, and that actually brings me to one point, which is, okay, so there's a lot of overlap between what medical schools require and what you're going to take anyhow as a biology major. I tell my advisees that of the various majors, bio, ES bio, neuro, and BMB, the biology major has fewer required units. There's a little more room in your schedule to take some of these additional things, or just take more biology if you're interested, or more art or music or what have you. Whereas BMB and neuro have more required units. It's a little more rigid. But still, students do all those and then decide they want to go to medical school.
And I think I'm going to ask this question, but it's also because I'm not familiar with this test. But how does the biology major prepare students for the MCATs?
So I can't actually parse out bio majors versus all Reed College students who take the MCAT. But the last time that I checked the data, the average, of Reed students who take the MCAT, on average, they get a higher score than nationwide students get who are admitted to medical school, if you follow. So basically, Reed students tend to do very well on the MCAT. I can't honestly say whether it's specifically the topics that we teach in introductory biology or all the other courses. I think not, because I think we actually don't really have the MCAT in mind, frankly, when we're writing our courses. But we like to think that we're teaching you how to process information rationally and logically and critically. And that skill is actually something that's going to be useful in taking the MCAT. You might want to do some practice tests and that sort of thing, just to sort of get in the habit of taking multiple choice tests. But the basic understanding and thought processes, we hopefully will have instilled pretty well into you.
And I'll also add to that in that we have an office called the Center for Life Beyond Reed, and they do a lot of work to prepare students for that post-Reed life, right? Which can be graduate school and graduate school admissions, or some sort of grad PhD program combination, or that could be joining the workforce. So whatever that might look like, they can. They often have resources to help prepare students as well. I'm not seeing any more questions coming into the chat. So my final question for you is, and not just the bio program, but I would say maybe Reed as a whole. What do you love about Reed?
I really like the fact that that Reed students really are sort of genuinely engaged in these academic pursuits of all types. There's always something, always a talk or something to go to in a huge range. There's art installations over in the library all the time, and so there's just always a lot to do. And I think we have this sort of shared notion of the value of education. Um, we have Ren Fair coming up, and so I'm looking forward to the whimsical decorations that should appear across campus. If we can resurrect those traditions after a couple of years of COVID, um, and so it's a great time. April especially. April can be kind of stressful because the seniors are trying to finish up, but you come on campus that last Friday when theses are due, and you can just feel the mood has lifted. And all of a sudden, everybody's happy. And there's just this joy that comes out for Ren Fair weekend. And I'm looking forward to that.
I'm excited myself. I have yet to see a Ren Fair in all the
How
years
long
of
have you been here, Dev?
3 years, 3 or 4 years, but most of that was
Oh, yeah.
COVID. So
Dark ages.
yeah, and then the one year I was here, um, I was traveling
Ah,
for the
bugger.
college, so I'm excited to see it myself. Well, Janice, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with all of us and answer some phenomenal questions and really give us great insight on um, what a special and awesome program our biology programs are here at Reed. So on behalf of all of us, thank you for taking that time, and thank you to those of you who took the time out of your day to learn more about the bio program and get your questions answered. We appreciate you doing so. We still have some more sessions coming up over the next week and a half, so make sure you check out those. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day.
And I'm sure if you have any other specific bio questions, if you ask the admissions folks about them, they will forward those as necessary to any of us, and we're happy to answer them.
Great, awesome. Thanks so much, everyone. Thanks, Janice.